Good evening, America, and welcome to this Just the News, Real America's Voice special report, The House Rules That Run Our Country. I'm your host, John Solomon. Tonight, in partnership with our sponsor, Heritage Action for America, we're going to explore how the new conservative majority in the U.S. House is beginning to reshape the American agenda, from shrinking the size of government and federal spending to restoring security and sanity at the southern U.S. border. The American people last November sent a very clear message. They want change. The latest Pew Research polling shows just 24% of Americans now trust our federal government to do what is right most of the time. That's nearly half of what it was during the Reagan-Bush years. So with public trust in government at historic lows and inflation at all-time highs, it's time for game-changing solutions. This 118th Congress started out with a bit of drama as Republicans fought to reshape the rules of the House before electing Kevin McCarthy Speaker. While the mainstream media and Democrats poked fun at that debate, it fundamentally changed the way Washington will operate and spend your money for the next 2 years. And the real winners will be you, the American people. That's because there's far more transparency in what Congress does, how it spends your money, and what it investigates. Most importantly, the decisions on what Congress will address move closer to you, the taxpayer, by empowering your elected representatives, not swampy special interests, to decide the House agenda. Now, over the next hour, we're going to explore how this newly reshaped Congress will address the challenges ahead, from tackling the debt ceiling and reducing spending to securing the border, ending the political weaponization of federal law enforcement, and making our economy China-proof going forward. Those are big issues that, once fixed, will recalibrate the course of America's compass and make us more secure and more free. And with such an ambitious agenda ahead, we have the perfect first guest. He's the quarterback of the new GOP-led House, Majority Leader Steve Scalise from the great state of Louisiana. Mr. Leader, great to have you on the show, sir.
Hey, John, it's great to be with you. Good to see you.
You as well. You've been very busy, off to an exciting start with this new Congress. When Americans look back, everyone's trying to just worry about their grocery cart and their gas tank and getting the kids to school. But when they look back in a few months, what will be the most significant changes that will impact everyday Americans from your new agenda?
The most significant change is that we have finally restructured Congress so that we, rank and file members of Congress, everybody across this political spectrum, can actually focus on fighting for the hardworking families who have been crushed by all the crazy spending and rules and regulations coming out of Washington. It seems like Washington for the last 2 years was focused on going after the families and the businesses who make this country work. And now we're flipping that script. And that was really the biggest change, is that we're going to be bringing bills to the floor to fix so many of the problems that Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi created, from the border crisis, inflation that's crushing families. That's still probably the biggest complaint and problem you hear about. Crime in communities, parents being involved in their kids' education. You can go down the list, but we're bringing bills to the floor to address these problems. And by the way, no more multi-trillion-dollar spending bills. Seemed like every month out of Biden, we were getting bills that were trillions of dollars, spending money on things that had nothing to do with COVID, that were making matters worse for families.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. Now, you've had some early bipartisan successes, particularly as it comes to making our economy China-proof, decoupling our economy from some of China's bad interests. Tell us a little bit about how Democrats have crossed over a few times already.
Yeah, it's amazing. For 2 years, Pelosi wouldn't allow any bills to come to the floor to hold China accountable, to have any focus on American energy. And so we brought a bill to say that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which President Biden has rated more than 40% of our nation's reserve oil supply, he's rated to mask his bad policies. And one of those sales went to China. And so we brought a bill to say, if you raid Spro, you can't sell it to China. We got a majority of Democrats to vote for that bill. And the Washington media was saying that that was going to be a partisan bill. Clearly not partisan. In fact, it's veto-proof. Hopefully the Senate takes that up. Then we set up a special committee to look into the Chinese Communist Party's actions, both here in America and abroad, and finally start confronting the threat that China poses. And again, that was a very overwhelmingly bipartisan vote. Every Republican voted for it, but a majority of Democrats voted for it as well. And this is something that was off limits. Pelosi wouldn't allow any oversight into China. And then, of course, there are going to be other things that, for whatever reason, the Democrats are not on board with us yet on, and that is holding this administration accountable, the kind of oversight that people have been hungry to see, from bringing in Secretary Mayorkas, looking into COVID, from the origins of COVID, to the school shutdowns where the unions the teachers unions were colluding with the White House to change the science to keep millions of kids shut out of school. All of those things, including the weaponization of the federal government against regular Americans, all of that is already in the works. And I think you're going to be excited about what you see, John.
Yeah, I think the American people are too. And one of the fun things, yeah, I get a weekly email from your office, and it's great because it not only lays out the accountability agenda, it shows that Republicans are going to end that accountability hearings by putting fixes in place, whether it's stopping the role of federal government in censorship, which no one could imagine we would be doing a few years ago, to how we're going to reduce spending. This is not just an accountability political exercise. You really want to put fixes in place, and you have a lot of them already lining up, don't you?
Yeah, and in fact, we spent a lot of time changing the rules of the House because Pelosi would use the rules of the House to do things like, she would have these massive bills. You saw that crazy omnibus spending bill just a few months ago, over $1 trillion, thousands of pages, dropped by dark of night. Nobody who voted for it had a chance to read it. Items in there that were completely unrelated to the subject matter, which was funding the government. So we made rules changes so that that can't happen again. You can't have those kind of bills come to the floor with multiple subjects. How about a bill that actually has to deal with the subject that it was drafted to address? The spending changes that we're going to make to finally start putting Washington on a budget. We're already in the middle of that debate right now with the debt ceiling, where President Biden for 2 years went on this crazy spending spree, over $5 trillion, and he maxed out the nation's credit card, which is the debt ceiling. And now you hear Biden saying, hey, just give me more money, no questions asked. That's not going to happen, John. If you gave your credit card to your kids and they maxed it out, they wouldn't come and say, hey, give me another $2,000 to go spend some more money. You would actually sit down with them and say, we need to have a talk about how you can get control over spending. We're going to have that conversation with President Biden. He doesn't want to have it, but you know what? The country wants it to happen. It's reasonable, it's responsible, and it's a long time coming.
Yeah, that it is. And there's a lot of demagoguery that goes in on the debt ceiling over the last decade. But for the longest time, it was really set for a reason so that there could be an honest discussion about what our spending priorities would be and what we can really afford and what we can't afford. It looks like you're beginning to change the narrative back from the demagoguery of the last 10 years. Oh, you're going to put us at risk in the credit world. No, you're not. You're trying to have an honest discussion about what is right for America to spend and what we can't afford to spend anymore. How much have you been able to change that narrative in the first few weeks in power?
Well, this is going to be a long education process because the mainstream media is going to just try to bang the drums and say, oh my God, the nation might default and the credit markets will collapse. And Biden, of course, himself is going to be the worst at this. He's going to threaten Social Security. He's going to threaten the pay for our troops. Remember this, for every dollar that's coming into Washington, $1.29 is being spent. That's the spending problem that we have, if you want to break it down. But what it means is we're still taking in $1. It's not like the federal government's not bringing in any money. The real problem is it's spending more than it's taken in. So if you only spent $1 for every dollar that comes in, why is it that President Biden is saying he's not going to pay the nation's debts with that dollar? He's not going to pay Social Security with that dollar or pay our troops. Now, he's going to keep paying the EPA and the IRS and all these federal agencies that have been weaponized against hardworking families. It shows you his priorities. And it's time we reorganize our priorities as we work to get spending under control and make Washington live within its means. So that's an education process. And we're going to be talking about it a lot because it's not as simple as, oh, gee whiz, if we just don't give the president a new credit card so he could go max that one out again, then the country is going to default. That's not the case. And that's where the president wants people to be in such fear that they'll just call their members of Congress and say, give President Biden more money to spend. Anybody who thinks he hasn't had enough money to spend hasn't been following what's going on in Washington the last 2 years. It's been the wildest spending spree in the history of our country, and it's got to end.
Yeah, and you see these recent reports of our own auditors finding $400 billion of COVID aid went to people that weren't entitled to it or went to fraud. It's an amazing amount of money with no accountability. Yeah, there was no accountability.
Yeah,
It's
that accountability is coming now, so it's a new day.
No, it's such an important moment in our history. A lot of people saw the dramatic week of debate before Kevin McCarthy was elected Speaker, and they thought, "Oh my God, this is what is it? What's going on there?" But you emerge as a caucus so much more united, it seems, and it seems like the ultimate winner isn't individual lawmakers who held out, but the American people, because they have a lot more say over the agenda. Do you think the American people are beginning to see the benefits of that debate?
Yeah, what was really encouraging, John, is people were watching. It's C-SPAN, which covers Congress. It gets a decent number of followers, but surely it's not multi-millions. There were millions of people every day watching, and what they were watching and listening to was a real honest debate, not about personality differences, but about how to fix a broken Washington. And that's one thing I think everybody recognizes. Washington's broken. It wasn't focusing on the needs of the families who are struggling in America. And that's really what the focus of the differences were. How can we come together? How can we fix Washington so that we can then go fix the problems of the country? So we spent 4 days working on fixing Washington. That allows us in a much better way to spend the next 2 years fighting for those families who've been left behind by Washington. And so I've been very encouraged by it. It's going to allow more engagement. We ended proxy voting. Members actually have to show up to work like every other American does. You had massive bills where over 200 people were voting through somebody else. They're sitting at home while these bills are being debated in Washington. Show up and do your job like every other American has to do.
The no-show Congress has been ended. That alone is a big symbol to American folks. One of the things the last time Republicans were in charge is they passed historic tax cuts, and that had an enormous impact on the economy. In fact, tax revenues are at an all-time high after cutting tax rates because the economy grew so well. How important is it to make those tax cuts permanent and to continue to give money back to the American people?
John, making those tax cuts permanent is a top priority of this new House Republican majority. And so Jason Smith is now the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. We've spoken about it. He's got a strong interest in getting something moved quickly to make those tax cuts permanent. It juiced the economy like we've never seen. Kevin Brady was the author of that bill under President Trump. And when we passed the bill, it was amazing how quickly the economy started turning around. We were losing great companies leaving America, millions of jobs leaving America, because we had the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. And not only did we reverse it, we became now the most impressive, effective economy in the world. President Biden's obviously slowed that down with all of his rules and regulations, killing American energy, going after industries. But at the same time, if we see those tax rates go up, we'll become less competitive again, and it'll hurt the lower and middle income families the most. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to bring that bill to the floor in these first few months as well.
Yeah, that's important stuff. We got about 35, 40 seconds left. Just real quickly, energy, you have a plan to make it more bountiful again, make it less expensive, and also by using natural gas and nuclear energy, bring down carbon emissions. That's a winner with a lot of people. Tell us about how important that is.
Yeah, I think people realize now more than ever how important a smart energy policy is. President Biden went after American energy from day one, killing Keystone, shutting down permitting, pipelines. So he's made it harder to produce energy in America, which has made us more dependent on foreign countries for our energy. That's ludicrous. Prices are through the roof. It's not only at the pump, it's at your electricity bill. Families are fed up with it. We've got a plan. We're going to be bringing that package of bills to the floor in these next few weeks to show the country how we can become energy independent again and not relying on foreign countries. And oh, by the way, it's better for the environment because no one makes energy cleaner in the world than the United States of America. Don't get on your private jet, John Kerry or Al Gore and go to Davos to talk about it. You can actually do it better here. Save that jet fuel and those carbon emissions of hanging out with all your buddies in Europe talking about destroying the planet and destroying America's economy. Let's make our own energy again.
I see a lot of heads in America nodding yes. They like what you just said. Mr. Leader, great honor to have you on today. Thanks for getting us up to speed on a very ambitious agenda. We're going to be watching closely, but a great honor to start the year with you.
John, it's going to be an exciting time. I look forward to visiting with you some more. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Good to have you on. All right, folks, stick around. You just heard from one of the most important members of Congress. We're going to get a freshman member's perspective, a brand new member. He's going to give us his perspective of what he's witnessed in the first few weeks in the 118th Congress right after these commercial messages.